What if the greatest weapon ever designed wasn't a bomb, but a being capable of healing the deepest wounds of war? And what if that weapon was a dog the government had ordered destroyed? This is the story of Clara Vance, a veteran hiding from her ghosts and the stray she rescued in a storm. She thought she was saving him, but she was about to discover he wasn't just a dog. He was a secret, and some secrets don't stay buried. Her small cabin was nestled deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, a place where the morning mist clings to the valleys like a well-kept secret. To any passerby on the distant highway, it looked like an idyllic escape, a perfect picture of solitude. But for Clara, it wasn't solitude. It was quarantine. She had come here to silence the world, hoping it might silence the noise inside her own head. See, when most people think of a veteran's trauma, they picture the flash of gunfire, the chaos of a battlefield. It's a common misconception to think all wounds have to be loud. Clara's war wasn't fought in the sand and the heat. It was fought from a sterile, air-conditioned room thousands of miles away. She was a former Air Force drone pilot. Her battlefield was a bank of glowing screens, her weapon a joystick, her reality a God's-eye view of a world she would never touch. She never felt the ground shake. She never smelled the smoke. But the ghosts? The ghosts were as real as the coffee she brewed every morning. They weren't loud either. They were quiet, pixelated figures on a screen one moment and gone the next, all with the clinical click of a button. And then came the silence. The deafening, soul-crushing silence that followed a successful mission. That was her echo. The psychological toll of playing God from a distance had a name she learned later: moral injury. It was the slow erosion of the soul, a wound so deep no stitches could close it. Her days bled into one another in a haze of insomnia and hypervigilance. A car backfiring on the main road would send a jolt of ice through her veins. A knock at the door was a threat, not a welcome. She was a prisoner in paradise, and the warden was her own mind. That's how things were until the storm came. It wasn't a gentle rain. It was a furious, violent squall that seemed to want to tear the mountains from their roots. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and rain hammered against her windows. In the middle of it all, through the flashes of lightning, she saw something. A flicker of movement near the edge of her property, right by the tangled barbed wire fence of the old decommissioned military communications outpost that bordered her land. Her training, the part of her that was still a soldier, took over. She grabbed a heavy flashlight and a rain slicker and stepped out into the chaos. And there he was, a golden-haired Labrador, drenched and shivering, not cowering or whining, but just watching her. He was impossibly still, his eyes fixed on hers with an unnerving, quiet intelligence. There was no collar, no tags, just a deep exhaustion in his gaze that she recognized instantly. It was the same look she saw in her own mirror every morning. She coaxed him inside. He moved with a strange, deliberate grace, as if every step was calculated. He didn't bark, not once. He just sat on the rug by the fireplace, the water pooling around him, and continued to watch her. The next day she took him to the local vet, an old-timer named Doc Miller. He confirmed the dog was underweight, but otherwise healthy. But then he found something else. "Well, that's odd," Doc Miller mumbled gently, folding back the dog's ear. "Take a look." There on the delicate skin inside his ear was a faded tattoo. It wasn't a name or a symbol. It was a cold alphanumeric serial number, S27. "Looks military," the vet said, cleaning his glasses, "but not like any service tag I've ever seen. This is something else entirely." Clara took him home, a new layer of mystery now wrapped around her silent companion. She decided to call him Echo. It just felt right. The first few days established a new routine, a silent, shared existence. Echo never made a sound. He simply followed her, a golden shadow in her quiet life. But it was the nights that changed everything. The night terrors always came for Clara around 3 a.m. The cold sweat, the racing heart, the silent scream trapped in her throat as the images from the screens replayed in her mind. But on the third night, something different happened. Just before the familiar dread could take hold, she was nudged awake, a cold, wet nose on her cheek. Echo was standing beside her bed, his head cocked, his amber eyes glowing in the moonlight. He hadn't waited for her to scream. He had woken her up before the nightmare began. As a wave of anxiety washed over her, he did something even stranger. He hopped onto the bed and laid his full body across her chest, his head resting over her heart. It wasn't the needy gesture of a pet seeking comfort. It was a deliberate, steady pressure. Grounding. A word surfaced from the fog of her memory, a term from a long-forgotten psych evaluation: deep pressure therapy. A technique used to calm the nervous system. And this dog, this stray, was performing it instinctively. Night after night, the ritual repeated. He became her early warning system, her living anchor in the stormy sea of her subconscious. He didn't lick her face or offer playful distractions. He met her trauma with a profound, solemn stillness that was more comforting than any words could ever be. Clara started to realize she hadn't just found a stray. He had found her. They were two broken pieces of a forgotten war speaking a language no one else could understand. A dialect of shared damage and quiet survival. True connection, she was learning, doesn't require words. It's found in the quiet spaces. Clara started to realize she hadn't just found a stray. He had found her. They were two broken pieces of a forgotten war, speaking a language no one else could understand. A dialect of shared damage and quiet survival. True connection, she was learning, doesn't require words. It's found in the quiet spaces where one being's pain is simply and completely recognized by another. But Echo was more than just an anchor in the night. His intelligence was uncanny. One afternoon, while trying to fix a loose board on her porch, Clara dropped a specific screw into a pile of wood shavings. Frustrated, she sighed and scanned the mess, knowing it would take ages to find. Echo, who had been watching from the steps, calmly stood up, walked over and nudged the exact screw she needed out of the pile with his nose before looking back at her as if to say, "This one." It wasn't a trick she had taught him. He just seemed to know. He understood context and tension in a way that defied all logic. This growing mystery pushed Clara to do something she hadn't done in over a year. She decided to go into town. The weekly farmers market was a hub of local life, a place she had actively avoided. But Echo needed a better collar, and she needed to feel a part of the world again, even just for an hour with her silent guardian by her side. The town square was bustling, a kaleidoscope of bright vegetables, laughing children, and cheerful chatter that felt alien to Clara. Echo walked calmly by her side, unfazed by the noise, his presence a steadying force. And that's when she saw him. He was standing in the center of the square, a man who commanded attention without even trying. His name was Marcus Thorne, and his reputation preceded him. He was the owner of Thorne Canine Academy, a sprawling state-of-the-art facility on the other side of the county that trained elite dogs for the ultra-wealthy. He was charismatic, handsome, and radiated an almost blinding self-confidence. Beside him sat a magnificent German shepherd, poised like a statue, a perfect specimen of breeding and discipline. Thorne was mid-demonstration, his voice smooth and commanding. "You see," he said to the small crowd, "it's about bloodlines. It's about purity of purpose. A Thorne canine is not a pet. It is an asset precision-engineered for excellence." His philosophy was one of dominance and control, treating the dog as a beautiful machine to be programmed. As he finished, his eyes swept the crowd and landed on Clara and Echo. A slow, condescending smile spread across his face. He strode towards them, his perfectly polished boots clicking on the cobblestones. "Well, well, look what we have here," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. He circled Echo, his gaze critical. "A rescue, I presume, of questionable origin." He didn't even look at Clara, addressing his comments about her dog to the crowd. "This is what I'm talking about. See the lack of focus, the unpredictable genetics. You can give a stray a home, but you can't give it a pedigree." Clara felt a hot flush of anger rise in her neck. She stayed silent, her hand tightening on Echo's leash. Thorne finally turned his attention to her, his smile never reaching his eyes. "It's a noble sentiment, of course, but kindness doesn't forge discipline. Trust doesn't win competitions." He gestured back to his own dog, who hadn't moved a muscle. "That is excellence. "This," he said, waving a dismissive hand at Echo, "is a charity case." For a moment the old Clara, the one who would retreat, disappear, make herself small, almost took over. But then she looked down at Echo. He wasn't growling or cowering, he was just watching Thorn, his gaze steady and unwavering. In his quiet dignity, Clara found her own strength. This man wasn't just insulting her dog, he was insulting everything Echo stood for. He was insulting their silent language, their shared survival. Thorn, sensing he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted, decided to escalate. "You know," he said with a theatrical sigh, "the Appalachian Canine Trials are next month. My academy has won for the last decade. It's a true test of an animal's worth." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still perfectly audible to those nearby. "I'll tell you what. Why don't you enter your companion, show us all what that trust and kindness can do against a decade of superior breeding and training?" The challenge hung in the air, thick with ridicule. It was a trap, a public invitation to fail. He wanted to make an example of them. He thought she would refuse, that she would be too scared, too broken. And in that moment something inside Clara Vance snapped. A spark of the fighter she used to be the woman who stared into the face of conflict from half a world away ignited in her chest. This wasn't about a competition. This was about honor. It was about Echo. His arrogance, she realized, wasn't born from strength, but from a deep, gnawing insecurity. Echo's quiet competence, his existence outside the world of price tags and pedigrees, was a fundamental threat to Thorn's entire empire. Clara met his gaze, her voice low but clear, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "We'll be there." Thorn blinked, taken aback for a fraction of a second before his smug mask slipped back into place. "Excellent," he boomed. "We'll all be waiting." He turned and walked away, his champion dog falling into a perfect heel beside him. The crowd dispersed, leaving Clara and Echo alone in the suddenly quiet square. A wave of panic washed over her. What had she just done? She had just painted a target on their backs. But as she looked down at Echo, and he looked back up at her, a silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't a fight they had asked for, but it was a fight they would face, together. A dog's value isn't determined by its price tag, she thought. It's measured in loyalty, in heart. And they were about to show Marcus Thorn just how much heart they had. Their journey into the lion's den had just begun, and as they walked home, the quiet mountain air no longer felt like a retreat. It felt like a training ground.